I turn off our shared playlist, that old collection of songs we compiled in better days. We used to argue, amicably, about track order, about which genre should come first. Now I can't stand any of it. The music reminds me of another time, before I realized how fleeting forever can be. I press pause so abruptly, I half expect the speakers to protest. But the house goes silent instead, hushing my panic into a single throbbing heartbeat in my ears. My eyes are on the phone that's still plugged into the wall, screen glowing with the pause track, as if waiting for me to restore the melody. I do nothing of the sort. I let it stay there, suspended between motions, while I slowly exhale. A photo. A man's face I barely recognize. That's how it started for me. A casual glance at Catherine's phone on a night when I couldn't sleep. She'd forgotten to close the gallery. The picture was grainy but close enough to see her leaning against him at some bar. The lighting was poor. A neon sign behind them. His arm around her waist like it belonged there. Her eyes gleaming with more than laughter. My veins turned to ice in that moment. I felt time slow, leaving me on the edge of something that had always been possible but never real. Then it hit me. This was real, and I couldn't go back. Time. It's a traitor, a silent enemy, creeping in on moments that once felt safe. I think about our wedding photos, Catherine in white, me in a borrowed tux. Back then, I believed in forever, or at least in the power of routine, the slow and steady progression of life. Now, I see how time unravels illusions. A decade can dissolve so quietly that you don't notice the corrosion until one day, your wife is in someone else's photo, holding onto someone else's hand. I remember the letter in my hands. The postman's footsteps fading on the porch, a polite wave maybe, or none at all, as he disappeared onto the sidewalk. I'd expected an envelope for me, bills, advertisements, something worthless. Instead, I see a different name, Jake Russell, scribbled with a certain casual boldness. Then one line on the paper inside, "Are you free tonight, babe?" A question that by all logic wasn't meant for me. Yet I read it again, and again, wanting to tear it to pieces, but stopping short, a quiet rage blooming in my chest. My breath was ragged. The quiet Sunday sun glinted off the maillocks. Catherine was out grocery shopping. Perfect timing. She wouldn't see me discover it. Maybe that was fate, or maybe just a perverse coincidence. I shut the door, walked into the kitchen, and tried to figure out how I felt. Betrayed. That word seemed too neat, too theatrical, for what was ripping through my insides. Humiliated. Yes, a humiliating sense of suddenly being the last to know, the final fool in a small-town drama that had been unfolding behind my back. I should have confronted her outright, should have demanded to know why. But something stopped me. I didn't want an explanation. I wanted to hold the advantage, to keep my knowledge hidden so I could decide how best to handle things. Time was my enemy, but for once, I realized I could weaponize it. Let them think I'm oblivious while I gather every detail. If he was bold enough to put that note in the mail, I had no doubt they'd get careless. People in lust do stupid things. I counted on that. For 3 days, I barely slept. I replayed glimpses of the photo in my head, imagining how her lips might press against his ear in some dark corner, how she might arch her back in that easy, instinctive way that she used to do with me. A swirl of anger, shame, and a bizarre calm all fused together. I used to think heartbreak felt like burning, but mine felt more like frost, an icy numbness creeping into every corner of my mind. On the 4th day, she came home late. She'd left saying she had a meeting with an old friend. My heart hammered in my chest when she returned. I smelled cheap bar soap on her skin instead of her usual jasmine perfume. She walked past me in the hallway. Our eyes met for half a second, as if we were strangers on a bus. She muttered something about being exhausted and disappeared into the bedroom. I heard the shower switch on. I stood there, leaning against the living room wall, caught in a swirl of rage. My reflection in the mirror across from me was unreadable. Blank, even. I thought to myself, you look like a corpse. The next morning, Catherine was up before I was. Normally my job. She'd brewed coffee, black, just as I liked it. She set it on the table, a small, uncertain smile. A pang of old tenderness flickered in my gut. Then I remembered the letter and the picture. My stomach churned. We had a short, clipped conversation about grocery lists, electric bills, mundane routines. Each word felt like a carefully choreographed dance, both of us stepping around landmines. She looked away a lot, fiddling with her wedding ring, as if it might slip right off her finger. Our voices were the voices of strangers. "Will you be home for dinner?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral, almost official. "I think so. Might have to check some editing drafts," she said, voice tense, not meeting my eye. "All right," I replied curtly, sipping my coffee. Time slowed. That coffee tasted like acid. I wanted to fling the mug against the wall, watch it shatter. But I did nothing except swallow and nod like I was negotiating with a business associate. She left soon after, her footsteps echoing in the hallway, the door shutting with a crisp click. I sat there, alone, eyes on the empty chair she'd left behind. Part of me hated her. Another part hated myself. How had I let it get this far? I was the one who always paid attention to small changes, from the tilt of her head to how she styled her hair. When did I stop noticing? When did she stop caring if I noticed? I wondered if time itself had conspired against us, whittling away at the foundation of our marriage until it was just a husk. I let out a breath that felt like it was carved from stone. 2 days passed. Then I saw him in person. I was waiting in the car outside her workplace, a small co-working space she occasionally visited to meet clients. My chest felt tight the whole time, my fingers tapping the steering wheel. Maybe he wouldn't show. Maybe I'd been wrong. Or maybe it was just some fling that had already ended. I almost convinced myself of that. Then I saw him. Jake Russell. Tall, a certain swagger in his step. He walked beside her, leaning in too close. She smiled up at him, a private, intimate expression I hadn't seen on her face in months. I felt everything inside me seize. Time slowed down again, turning seconds into an excruciating slideshow. I spotted his hand brushing against her back. She didn't move away. I wanted to storm out of the car, confront him on the spot. My pulse roared in my ears, but some last-second sense of control pinned me to my seat. She turned around, scanning the street. I slouched lower, made sure the tinted windows were up. They hopped into his battered SUV and drove away. I followed, distant enough not to raise suspicion, but close enough to keep them in sight. A cheap motel. A dingy parking lot. My heart hammered so hard I almost got dizzy. I parked across the street. They got out, glancing around. Catherine, checking her watch. He, leaning in to whisper something in her ear that made her smile in that secret way. In that moment, I felt the full weight of my humiliation. I was a man watching his wife scurry into a motel room with another. The air felt thick, suffocating. My mind conjured images of them behind that closed door, his hands on her, her lips parted in a soft moan. I felt a fierce pang in my gut, half agony, half fury. A wave of nausea nearly doubled me over. Still, I sat there, engine off, eyes glued to that tarnished motel sign. Minute after minute passed, like an eternity and in slow motion. I don't remember how long I waited. Possibly an hour, maybe less. They emerged, looking flushed. She smoothed her hair. He lit a cigarette and offered her one, but she shook her head. She kissed him quickly before climbing back into the SUV. My stomach lurched again, and I had to fight a sudden urge to tear the door off my car. Rage coursed through me like a hot brand. But I stayed. I watched them drive away, my heart as cold as a stone at the bottom of a dark well. I followed, planning to keep trailing them. But they parted ways. First, he dropped her off at a bus stop. She probably had her own car parked somewhere else. Then Jake drove off alone. Instead of going home, I shadowed him. I found out where he lived. It was a grimy apartment building on the east side of town, paint peeling off the walls. I wrote down the address in a small notebook I kept in the glove compartment. My mind reeled with possibilities. Then I drove home, calm but unsettled, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Inside the house that evening, I pretended everything was normal. I asked about her day. She said it was fine, that she'd run late editing a big manuscript. She asked how I was. I responded, "I'm all right," in the dull, composed tone of a stranger. We hardly looked at each other. That night, I lay awake in bed for hours, next to a woman who smelled faintly of cheap soap again. I stared at the ceiling, hearing the faint hum of the air conditioner and her soft, steady breathing. She seemed at peace, or maybe just exhausted. Time. The unstoppable current that drags us forward, no matter how desperately we cling to the shore. That's how I felt. Battered by waves, powerless to stop it. But I had a plan, or the beginnings of one. A few days later, I got that letter out again. "Are you free tonight, babe?" It was scrawled in a bold hand, a message I wasn't meant to see. The address was Jake's. Smirking, I thought about the simplest, cruelest approach. Drop this letter on her parents' doorstep, or maybe send it to some public place, humiliating her. But that was petty, impulsive. I wanted something bigger, something more profitable. The memory of her face as she left that motel room etched itself into my brain, fueling me. I discovered something about myself. Vengeance can come wrapped in a quiet package. One morning, I left early for work. An excuse to cover the real estate front, but also to monitor her schedule. I knew she had a client call that day, something about a final proof for an author. At noon, she texted me, "Running errands, see you at dinner." So predictable. I waited in a coffee shop near that same motel, my eyes flicking to the parking lot across the street. Sure enough, within the hour, the same battered SUV pulled in. Catherine arrived separately in her car, stepping out in a simple blouse and jeans, hair pinned back. She scanned the lot, phone in hand. He waved from the driver's seat. I could practically hear the pulse pounding in my ears as she climbed into his SUV. They chatted for a moment. Then she leaned toward him, lips meeting his. I looked away, swallowing the lump of rage in my throat. I followed them to the motel for a second time, my foot pressing the gas pedal in short, jerky motions. My mind conjured images I didn't want but couldn't stop. My stomach twisted in a furious knot. This was the second time I had them pinned. More than enough evidence, if I wanted to confront them. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I found a vantage point from the side alley and snapped a few photographs with my phone. Grainy and zoomed in, but undeniably them. My fingers trembled. I was crossing a line here, stepping into a realm of cold manipulation I never imagined for myself. But I needed these pictures. They were my currency, my method of control. She stayed with him in that motel for about 40 minutes. I recorded the time. They emerge, disheveled, his arm around her waist, her face flushed. My breath came hard, staccato puffs. But no part of me wanted to storm up to them. Let them remain oblivious. Let them believe they're free to indulge, while I quietly gathered every piece of evidence. That night, I was waiting in the living room when she got home. The table lamp was on, casting a harsh orange circle of light. She stepped inside, froze at the sight of me perched on the couch. For a moment, I wondered if my expression gave me away. But I stayed calm, measuring my words, letting them drop like stones in a well. "You're home early," she said, forcing a polite smile. "Yes," I replied, voice steady. "Clients canceled." She shifted her weight, chewing her lip. "Right." She set her purse down, and I noticed she smelled of the same bar soap again. I felt my mouth go dry. She avoided my eyes. I wanted to fling the truth at her, watch her scramble, but I didn't. Instead, I rose and left the room without another word. She didn't follow. Silence, thick as a funeral shroud, settled between us. The next evening, I received a phone call from a blocked number. Heavy breathing, then a click. No voice, no message. I suspected it might be Jake, or maybe a wrong number. Either way, tension coiled in my stomach. This was the life I was living. Suspense, secrecy, stepping carefully through a minefield. Catherine was in the shower then, the water running. I heard her humming. That used to be a comforting sound. Now it felt mocking. The next day, a large envelope slid under the door while I was at home. No postage. Inside, I found a photo. Grainy, but it showed me, leaning against my car as I watched Catherine's building. A note in messy scrawl. Stop watching us. My heart thudded. He was onto me. A swirl of adrenaline surged through my veins. So, he'd noticed me after all. For the first time, I felt real danger. But I also felt a strange calm. Let him know, I thought. It won't change my plan. I decided to confront Jake, alone. Not with fists, but with words, as if we were two strangers who needed to settle a transaction. I waited outside the bar where he bartended. I'd done my research. He had a shift that night. The sign above the door flickered in neon gloom. The place wasn't busy yet, only a few patrons inside. I walked in, took a seat at the bar, and ordered a whiskey, neat. He approached, chewing gum, raising an eyebrow. Clearly, he didn't recognize me right away. He poured the whiskey, slid it across the counter. Anything else, man? I held his gaze. Just some answers. He blinked, leaning forward. Do I know you? I took a slow sip, letting the burn anchor me. You know my wife. My voice was level, official. A flicker of realization passed over his face. He stood up straighter, as though bracing for a punch. His eyes flicked around, scanning for an escape, or maybe just trying to gauge how dangerous I was. Look, I don't want trouble, he said, voice low. Good, I answered. I'm not here to cause a scene. I kept my composure, but inside, my heart hammered against my ribcage like a battering ram. We stared at each other. The bar felt too bright, the cheap overhead lights exposing all the cracks and stains. My whiskey glass was half empty before he spoke again. Let's talk in the back, he muttered, glancing at the curious patrons. Lead the way, I replied. We stepped into a dingy storage room lined with boxes of beer and cleaning supplies. The door shut behind us, muffling the bar noise. He turned to face me, arms folded. A faint smell of stale liquor hung in the air, mixing with the tension. In the cramped space, I noticed how tall he was, maybe an inch or two taller than me. But he didn't look confident now. He looked worried. Good. You know, he began. She came to me. She was lonely. Said you two were basically done. I bristled. That's her story. Funny, we still share a house, a life, at least on paper. He exhaled loudly, running a hand through his hair. I'm not trying to break up marriages. It just happened. She never said it was serious. I mean, maybe she did, but she's not happy, man. Those words cut into me. I forced my face to remain impassive. So, you're doing her a favor? I asked, sarcasm dripping. He shrugged, deflated. Look, I get it. You want me to back off. Fine. I'll do that. He was backing down too easily. I tilted my head, stepping closer. I don't think you understand. I know everything. I have proof. Pictures, times, the works. If I share it, her life would be a wreck. Her reputation, maybe even her finances if there's a divorce. My voice was low, calm, and it surprised even me how controlled I sounded. But I'm not interested in that. Not yet, anyway. He narrowed his eyes. What do you want from me? I let a cold smile cross my face. Just keep doing what you do. But remember, I see everything. One screw-up, one sign of arrogance, and I send it all out. She'll have nothing, and you'll have nothing. Understand? He swallowed, nodding stiffly. Yeah, I get it. I nodded, satisfied with his fear. It was an ugly satisfaction, but it settled in my gut, like a heavy, comforting weight. Good, I said, turning to leave. Before I walked out, I glanced back. Have a nice shift, Jake. I left him standing there among the boxes, his face pale. The rest of the bar blurred as I stepped outside, gulping the cool night air. Something about that exchange lit a spark in me. Not the joy of a typical revenge, more of a grim sense of power. I wanted him, and Catherine, to sweat. I wanted them to tremble every time they met, always wondering if I was watching, waiting. I walked to my car, turned on the engine, and just sat for a moment, breathing in and out. The city lights felt sharper than usual. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked foreign, a ghost with a flicker of triumph in his eyes. Days turned into weeks. Catherine continued her charade. She'd slip away now and then, always with some excuse. I pretended not to notice, but I kept track. Jake must have warned her, I knew, or else she might have confronted me. Yet she said nothing. Our dinners were stiff, shallow affairs, words bouncing off each other like empty bullets. At night, she slept with her back to me, or sometimes in the guest room, claiming stress and insomnia. I didn't argue. I found a twisted sense of calm in letting them dig deeper. Meanwhile, I quietly updated our finances, making sure certain accounts were only in my name. I compiled documents that gave me the upper hand if this turned into a legal battle. But I had something else in mind. I realized I could use the tension, the secrecy, and turn it into leverage. Let her remain with him physically, but financially, I'd guard my territory. She'd chosen an affair with a part-time bartender. Good luck building a stable future with that. Meanwhile, I'd quietly set things up so that if she left me, she'd walk away with crumbs. Yet the humiliation didn't vanish. Each time she glanced at me with guarded eyes, it stung. Each time she left the house, I saw her car pull away, and the image of them locked together seared in my mind. I drank more than usual, but not enough to dull me entirely. My rage needed to stay sharp. Finally, one afternoon, Catherine approached me in the living room. I was on the couch, scanning a real estate listing, half-focused. She stood there, her hands clasped in front of her. She spoke quietly, with a tightness in her voice. "Richard," she said, "we need to talk." I looked up, feigning mild curiosity. "Sure." She sank onto the armchair across from me. I don't know how to say this without sounding dramatic, but things aren't okay, are they? I met her gaze, my face a mask of calm. "No, Catherine, they're not." She swallowed. "It's just, we've both changed, and maybe we haven't been open enough, or..." She trailed off. I said nothing, letting the silence fester. I could see the panic in her eyes. I think I need some space," she blurted. "I've considered moving out for a while." "And is that what you want?" I asked, cold, official. "You want to leave?" She hesitated, tears glinting at the corners of her eyes. "Yes, I think so. I'm not happy. Neither of us is." My chest tightened. I wanted to lash out, to scream about her betrayal. Instead, I stared at her, letting the question linger in my mind. Should I reveal what I know? But I remembered my plan, and I kept my voice level. "If that's what you want, you're free to go. I won't stop you." She blinked, taken aback by my calmness. "Okay, I'll start packing a few things. At least, for a while." I nodded, turning my attention back to the listing, pretending to read. She stood and left, probably expecting me to argue, to demand an explanation. I gave her nothing. That night, I heard her rustling around in the bedroom, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. I sat in the living room, sipping a scotch. The overhead lamp buzzed softly. Time felt like it was expanding, swallowing the life we once shared. The days of borrowed playlists, quiet breakfasts, Sunday laughter, they were gone. Now it was just emptiness, and me gripping the edge of it like a man clinging to wreckage after a shipwreck. She left with her small suitcase, her eyes red. She said a quiet goodbye that I didn't answer. The door clicked shut, and I found myself alone in the silence of a house that no longer felt like a home. A sensation of hollowness enveloped me. A man humiliated, left behind. But I had my plan, and that plan involved letting her run to him. Because eventually, they'd both face the consequences. For a while, nothing happened. She called once or twice, asking about mail or bills. I responded curtly, ignoring her attempts at small talk. I learned from a friend that she'd moved in temporarily with Jake. That thought sent a jolt through my system, but I forced it down. Let them be together. Let them think they'd won. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Catherine's number. My stomach flipped, but I answered in my calm, businesslike tone. "Richard, can we meet?" she asked, voice strained. "Why?" A pause. "I'd like to talk. Possibly about finances." I smirked, though my face felt rigid. "Okay. My office at noon tomorrow." The next day, she showed up in a neat blouse, her face drawn, eyes anxious. She sat across from me, my desk between us like a battlefield. The fluorescent lighting was harsh, highlighting every tense line on her face. "I'd like to discuss the house, the mortgage, how to handle everything," she began softly, folding her hands in her lap. I nodded, pulling out a file. "I've already had the paperwork reviewed. You want your share, correct?" She swallowed. "Yes. But I'm not demanding anything unfair. I just need enough to move on." I felt a flicker of pity. Then I reminded myself of her betrayal. My voice was flat. "I've taken care of the legalities. If you look here," I pushed a document toward her. "You can see you still have a stake, but it's been significantly reduced since you moved out, unless you want a full-scale divorce settlement battle." She shook her head, tears threatening. "No, I don't want that." "Sign here," I said, passing her a pen. She hesitated. I could almost see the wheels turning. She might have known she was about to lose everything. But she'd chosen the path that led her here. Jake had nothing to offer her but illusions, and I had the cold, hard facts. She signed, her hand trembling. She tried to meet my eye, but I kept my gaze on the papers. "Thank you," she whispered. I gave a curt nod. "Anything else?" She opened her mouth, closed it again, then stood up and walked out without another word. A few days after that, I learned from a mutual acquaintance that she and Jake were renting a small place together, scraping by. My reaction was oddly calm. I had fantasies of them fighting over money, of the electricity getting cut off, of the cheap motel experience turning into a permanent motel existence. But I didn't let my mind drown in vengeance. I was done giving them that power. I was done, or so I thought. Until one evening, I got a phone call. Jake's voice. Slurred. He was drunk. You ruined everything." He spat through the receiver. "She's miserable, you know. She wanted to come clean, thought you'd talk it out. But you were cold. Now she thinks she deserves this. She thinks we deserve this." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. I gave her exactly what she asked for. She's in pain, man," he continued, voice trembling. "And you're just twisting the knife." I closed my eyes. She twisted it first. I heard him exhale raggedly. Then he hung up. I stared at the dark screen. Something in his words stuck with me. She was in pain. Good. Or so I told myself. But I couldn't entirely shake the dull ache in my chest, the memory of simpler times. I poured another drink, sinking into the couch. Time marched on, and I felt like a shell, but at least I was the shell with the advantage. Weeks rolled by. I busied myself with work, focusing on new real estate deals. My colleagues noticed I was quieter, more driven. They attributed it to midlife realignment. I let them think that. Inside, I felt I'd aged a decade in a month. The humiliations, the betrayals. None of it was visible on the surface, but it ate away at my core. Then, one Saturday morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten again. I recognized Jake's scrawl instantly. That same arrogance. I tore it open. His words were scathing, laced with desperation. He accused me of playing puppet master, demanded I leave them in peace. The letter ended with a threat. If you keep messing with us, I'll do something you won't see coming. I stared at it, a faint smile tugging at my lips. The fool. He thought I was actively tormenting them. In truth, I had stepped back, letting them sink or swim on their own. But his fear was real. Good. Let him fear. Let him suspect me around every corner. I crumpled the letter, dropped it into the trash can, and lit a match. The flames consumed his words. That moment felt symbolic. No matter how they twisted, I held the upper hand. I'd been humiliated, yes. But now, they were the ones looking over their shoulder. My heart hammered with something akin to triumph. That afternoon, Catherine called me. I almost ignored it, but a strange impulse made me pick up. Her voice was strained. "Richard, can we meet? This is important." I sighed. "What is it?" She hesitated. "Jake's in trouble. He got fired from the bar. Something about a fight. We're behind on rent. I just need help." I let out a slow breath. "What do you want me to do?" A pause, then a quiet plea. "Could you lend me some money? I'll pay it back, I promise. I'm just stuck." A swirl of conflicting emotions ran through me. Memories of lying in bed together, her laughter on our wedding day, all tangled with images of her pressed against him in a motel room. Rage and pity warred in my chest. Then a cold resolve settled over me. "You left, Catherine. You made your choice." Her voice cracked. "I know. It was a mistake, but I can't undo everything now." A muffled sob. "Please, Richard." I exhaled, closing my eyes. This was the moment. The power dynamic had reversed. I realized that for all the humiliation I'd endured, I now had something more potent. The ability to say no or yes and shape her future. I tasted the bitterness of that power, aware it wouldn't fix the past, but it offered a cruel satisfaction. "We'll meet," I said curtly. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office." "Thank you," she whispered. I hung up. The phone felt heavier than it should. I spent the night in a strange calm. The whiskey burned less. My mind was oddly clear. This was the final act, I realized. Time had brought us here. A series of choices, mistakes, resentments. Now I held the reins. The next day, she arrived on time, wearing the same hesitant expression. I let her sit while I stood behind my desk, arms folded. She looked smaller, somehow diminished. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Let's get to the point," I said, my voice clinical. "How much?" She blinked, tears welling up. 2,000 would at least keep us afloat for the next month. I nodded. "And then what?" She flinched. I don't know. Jake might find another bartending job." I let silence hang. "You must realize how this looks to me. You leave me for him. You humiliate me. And now you come begging for money. Why would I do that?" She bit her lip, tears spilling. Because I know you're not cruel, Richard. You're not the monster I once thought. I'm sorry." Her apology felt like a hollow echo in the room. I stared at her, my expression cold. "I'm not the monster. But I'm no longer the naive husband, either." She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I understand." I inhaled slowly, then spoke. "I'll give you this money. But it's not a gift. Consider it a loan. Interest included." She stared at me, hopeful yet wary. "Interest. I'll have the terms printed up. You'll sign them. Monthly payments, plus a set interest rate. Or I can reject you outright and let you deal with eviction." Her shoulders sagged. "All right. I'll sign." I retrieved a document I'd prepared that morning, crisp lines, legal wording. I set it before her. She read it, her expression growing bleaker with each paragraph. "Is this even legal?" she murmured. I shrugged. "It's close enough. You want the money, you sign. No one's forcing you." She wrote her name with trembling fingers. I felt something inside me harden further. This was not mercy. This was a calculated step. She'd remain indebted to me for a long time. She slid the paper back, eyes brimming with fresh tears. "Thank you," she whispered. I handed her a check, then turned away, looking out the window. Moments later, I heard the door open and close. She was gone, like a ghost. I stood there, feeling neither relief nor happiness, just a grim satisfaction. Not every pain is visible, but it eats away at you. This was my way of letting her and Jake live with what they'd done, day by day. That evening, I sat alone in the darkened living room, a half-empty glass of whiskey in my hand. My phone rested on the table, the old shared playlist still loaded, paused at track 5. A new wave of memory hit me. The day we compiled that playlist, full of songs that made us dance in our cramped apartment. We were both so young, so in love. Time, that traitor, had killed it. Now, I realized, the final act had arrived. I'd effectively stranded Catherine with Jake, financially pinning them under my control. The future they had was shaky, overshadowed by the knowledge that at any moment I could choose to ruin them, or not. The revenge wasn't in a dramatic confrontation or a public scandal. It was in letting them struggle, letting them suspect my next move, letting them wonder if tomorrow I'd tire of my generosity and reveal every seedy detail to the world. I downed the rest of the whiskey, feeling the burn. My heart pounded heavily, yet I felt almost numb. The humiliations, the betrayal, I carried them inside, a wound that might never fully heal. But I took a grim comfort in this final, silent victory, if you can call it that. Outside, the evening stretched on, quiet and still. Somewhere, Catherine and Jake were living in a cramped apartment, probably bickering over overdue bills, tip money, and uncertain prospects. Let them have each other. I didn't need to chase them. They were already in their own private hell, courtesy of their choices. And if that wasn't enough punishment, I had all the evidence I needed to make it worse. At my whim, with a single push of a button, I sank deeper into the couch. The house was dark. Still no music. I was the last one standing in a war that should never have been fought. My victory tasted bitter, but it was mine. As the clock ticked, each second a tiny hammer, I realized that maybe I'd died a long time ago inside this marriage. Maybe the man I used to be was gone, replaced by someone colder, someone who knows how to hide the scars. And that was all right. Sometimes you have to make peace with the ghost you've become. My eyes drifted closed. A faint smile tugged at my lips. With the house so silent, I could hear my own heartbeat, steady, relentless. I'd won, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt more like surviving. And at least for now, that was enough. I opened my eyes, letting the final wave of acceptance wash over me. In the end, I realized that true happiness is being the last to understand you've already won. I had. And no one could take that away from me.